The desert lay stretched out like an endless canvas of gold and red, painted with the brush of a merciless sun. Heat shimmered above the sand and the hardpan trails, twisting the horizon into waves that looked almost like water, but never were. The West was a liar that way. It promised comfort just beyond the ridge, but every time a man rode closer, it was only more dust, more rock, more fight for breath. Cole Danner knew the desert's tricks too well. His wide-brimmed hat cast a shadow over his square jaw and sun-browned face, but even then, sweat dripped down his neck and dampened the collar of his trail-worn shirt. His horse, a bay mare named Whiskey, snorted and shook her head against the heat. The two of them had been riding since dawn, cutting across the Badlands toward a cabin Cole called home, though home was just 4 pine walls thrown together years ago, when he first staked his claim in this unforgiving land. Cole wasn't a man made for softness. At 32, he carried the kind of presence that made other cowboys straighten their backs. His shoulders were broad, his stride carried weight, and his eyes, gray like storm clouds rolling in over the plains, rarely gave much away. Folks in town whispered about him, how he'd once been a gun for hire, how he'd put down 3 outlaws in a single duel at Carson's Bluff, how he lived alone because no woman was brave or foolish enough to stick by him. Some said he was dangerous. Others said he was cursed. Cole didn't care much for what people said. Talk was cheap. Survival wasn't. By the time the mare carried him over the ridge and the outline of his cabin appeared, the sun had begun its slow crawl westward. Smoke rose thin from the chimney. Too thin, Cole realized. He'd left it cold when he rode out. Someone had been here. His hand drifted down to the worn grip of his Colt. Easy, girl, he muttered to Whiskey, sliding off the saddle. The dry earth crunched under his boots as he approached the cabin door. It was open, just a crack. The faint creak of a floorboard reached his ears. Cole pushed the door wide. Inside, standing by the hearth with a rag in her hands, was a woman. She spun around at the sound, nearly dropping the rag, her eyes wide with alarm. She wasn't armed, just a slim figure in a faded calico dress, her hair pinned up in a messy knot, strands falling loose around her face. I didn't mean no harm, she stammered, clutching the rag like it could shield her. Sheriff said you was looking for help. Cleaning work. Cole froze in the doorway, lowering his Colt but not holstering it. Sheriff sent you? She nodded quickly. Said you'd pay fair. Cabin looked like it needed a woman's hand. Her voice was soft, but steady enough to catch his attention. She wasn't trembling like most folks did around him. Cole studied her closer. She looked about 28, maybe younger, with the kind of worn strength carved into her face from years of hard living. Her dress was patched in places, her boots scuffed, but her eyes, hazel with flecks of green, carried something he couldn't pin down. Not fear, not exactly. More like defiance hidden beneath a polite mask. Nam, Cole asked finally. Anna McBride. Cole slid his Colt back into its holster, stepping further inside. Sheriff didn't mention sending you. He didn't. She blinked, then straightened her shoulders. Well, I reckon he don't need to tell you everything. You want the place cleaned or not? Cole's gaze swept across the cabin, dishes piled high, dust clinging to every corner, boots and gear scattered. He hadn't cared much about the mess, but he also knew how quickly vermin and sickness followed filth. How much you want? He asked. $1 a week. Cole's brow arched. That's all? Her chin lifted, defensive. It'll do. He reached into his vest, pulled out a silver dollar, and set it on the table. Start today. Anna nodded once, tucking the rag into her apron as if the deal sealed itself. The hours that followed fell into a rhythm. Cole sat outside, sharpening a Bowie knife on a whetstone, the scrape filling the silence, while Anna moved about inside, dusting shelves, scrubbing the floor with a bucket she'd hauled from the creek, humming faintly under her breath. Every so often, Cole's storm, gray eyes flicked to the doorway, watching her silhouette move in the dim light. She wasn't like the saloon girls in town, with their painted faces and easy laughs. She carried herself different, like a woman who'd weathered storms and was still standing, even if the wind had near broken her. When the sun dipped low and the sky bled orange, Anna stepped outside, wiping her hands on her apron. That'll do for today. Cole looked past her at the cabin, cleaner than it had been in months. Not bad. Anna's lips curved into the faintest ghost of a smile. You want me back tomorrow? Cole hesitated, then gave a single nod. Yeah. She picked up a worn shawl, slung it over her shoulders, and started down the trail on foot. Something about that struck him. Most women who worked odd jobs near town either lived close or caught a ride. But Anna walked. Cole watched her figure grow smaller against the twilight until the horizon swallowed her whole. The next day she came again. Same the day after, and the day after that. She never spoke much. Never lingered longer than she had to. But Cole noticed things. The way her hands were rougher than most women's, like they knew hard labor. The way she always declined when he offered coffee, as if she couldn't afford to accept even small kindnesses. The way she grew quieter whenever the talk in town drifted to families. On the fourth evening, curiosity gnawed at him enough to follow her. He saddled whiskey once the shadows grew long, trailing at a distance far enough not to be noticed. Anna didn't take the main road. She cut across the flats, into the scrublands where the soil turned thin and gray, where the land gave nothing easy. She walked for near an hour before Cole saw where she stopped. A shaft, if you could call it that. 4 crooked walls leaning like they wanted to give up, a roof patched with tar paper and tin, smoke weakly trailing from a rusted stovepipe. Cole narrowed his eyes. Through the broken slats of the wall, he caught sight of small figures moving inside. Children, 5 of them. Anna pushed the door open and a chorus of voices rose. Mama! Cole's jaw tightened. The kids rushed to her, their clothes threadbare, their faces smudged with dust. The oldest couldn't have been more than 12, the youngest barely 3. She hugged each of them tight, smoothing hair, kissing foreheads, her tired face breaking into warmth Cole hadn't thought possible. And suddenly it made sense. The worn dress, the scuffed boots, the way she never asked for more than $1. She wasn't working for herself. She was working to keep those kids alive. Cole sat back in the saddle, silent in the dusk. A storm of thoughts churned behind his gray eyes. The West was hard enough on a man alone. For a woman with 5 mouths to feed, it was near impossible. He'd only meant to hire someone to clean his cabin. But what he'd stumbled onto was something else entirely. Something that would change everything. The night air pressed cool against the desert as Cole Danner sat, astride whiskey, staring at the sagging shack. The sound of children's laughter drifted faintly through the thin boards, mixing with the tired, but gentle tone of Anna's voice as she settled them for the night. Cole's hand tightened on the reins. He had no business being there. A woman's life was her own, and the West had little room for a man nosing where he didn't belong. But he couldn't shake the picture seared into his mind. 5 half-starved kids clinging to their mother in a house that looked ready to blow down in the next storm. Damn it, he muttered under his breath. Whiskey snorted, as if in agreement. Cole turned his horse toward town, shadows stretching long under the moonlight. The saloon, by the time he pushed open the batwing doors of the Copper Star Saloon, the place was alive with smoke, laughter, and the twang of a fiddle. Cowhands crowded around tables, slapping cards down and spilling whiskey, while saloon girls weaved through the haze with painted smiles. Cole moved through it like a shadow, drawing a few wary glances. He wasn't the kind of man who blended easy. Cole Danner, a voice drawled from the corner. Cole glanced over. Sheriff Briggs sat at a table, pipe smoke curling around his weathered face. His badge gleamed faint in the lamplight. Sheriff, Cole muttered, dropping into the chair across from him. Briggs studied him. Heard you hired Anna McBride. Cabin's looking better already. Cole's jaw flexed. You knew she had kids. Briggs' expression darkened. 5 of 'em. Husband died in a mining accident 2 winters back. No family. No help. Town folks, well, you know how folks are. They give prayers easier than bread. Cole leaned back silent. Briggs exhaled smoke. You look like a man whose gut's churnin'. Don't get yourself tangled. Anna's a good woman, but the West don't spare good women. She's holdin' on by fingernails. Fingernails won't last long? Cole muttered. The sheriff raised a brow. You fixin' to do something about it? Cole didn't answer. He stood, pushing away from the table. A trouble rides in the next morning. Trouble rode into town. A gang of 3 outlaws. Men with faces cut from stone and hands never far from their irons, hitched their horses outside the general store. Their leader, a rangy man with a scar cutting across his cheek, went by the name Jeb Caraway. Folks said he'd gunned down 2 ranchers south of the border over a debt dispute. Cole was just finishing a cup of black coffee outside the saloon when he spotted them swaggering down Main Street. His eyes narrowed. Caraway and his men weren't here for supplies. They were sniffing for easy prey. And prey didn't come easier than a widow and 5 children living in a shack on the edge of nowhere. As the warning, Anna showed up at Cole's cabin later that day, as usual, with her rag and bucket. She gave him a small nod, then got to work without a word. Cole watched her for a long moment before finally speaking. "You ever hear of Jeb Caraway?" Her hands paused, wringing the rag. "Name sounds familiar. He and his men are in town. They'll be looking for weakness." Her lips pressed tight, but she didn't stop scrubbing. "Everything out here looks like weakness to men like that." Cole leaned forward, voice low. "I seen your shack, Anna." Her head snapped up, eyes flashing. "You followed me." "I did," he admitted, unflinching. "You're barely keeping those kids fed, living in a place held together with spit. If Caraway catches wind of it." "I ain't asking for your pity, Mr. Danner." She cut in sharply. "I do what I must. Those kids are mine, and I'll keep 'em safe." Cole's jaw tightened. "Can't do it alone." Anna's eyes softened, just for a heartbeat. "Been doing it alone since the day my John was buried." And with that, she turned back to her work. Conversation over. Fire on the horizon that night, smoke rose in the east. Not cookfire smoke, thicker, blacker. Cole was saddling whiskey before the second plume curled skyward. He rode hard, dust flying, until the shack came into view. Caraway's gang had already been there. The door hung broken, a window shattered. The kids huddled outside, clutching one another, wide-eyed with terror. Anna stood in front of them, a shotgun braced in her hands, dress torn, face streaked with soot. Cole reined in, leaping from the saddle. "You all right?" he barked. Anna nodded, fierce despite the fear in her eyes. "They came demanding food. Said we owed him tribute. I sent him packing." Cole's gaze hardened. "They'll be back." Preparing for war, the next days blurred into motion. Cole patched the shack's walls with spare timber from his cabin. He set traps along the trail, checked and rechecked his Colt, and made sure Anna's shotgun was loaded with buckshot instead of bird pellets. The children watched with wide eyes, sensing the storm. Anna cornered him one evening as the sun bled over the desert. "Why are you doing this, Cole? Why help us?" He met her gaze, steady and unyielding. "Because I've seen what men like Caraway do, and I ain't standing by while he does it to you." For the first time, Anna's mask cracked. Her eyes shone, but no tears fell. She just nodded, swallowing hard. High noon Caraway came 3 days later. The gang rode in bold as brass, dust clouds swirling behind them, spurs jangling. Jeb Caraway grinned, showing yellow teeth, his hand resting casual on his revolver. Well, he drawled, reining up before the shack. "A pretty widow and her brats, hiding behind a gunslinger. Ain't that something?" Cole stepped forward, gray eyes like cold steel. "You want something, Caraway?" "Just collectin' what's owed." "World's a tax in place, Danner. Everyone pays." "Not here." The silence stretched, wind whispered through the scrub. A hawk cried overhead. Caraway's grin widened. "Then I reckon we settle it the old way." His hand twitched toward his Colt. Cole's iron cleared leather in a blur. One crack split the air. Caraway staggered, clutching his chest, eyes wide in disbelief before he collapsed into the dust. The other 2 drew, but Cole was faster. 2 more shots and both men dropped, their guns skittering from limp hands. Smoke curled from Cole's revolver as the echoes rolled away across the desert. Aftermath, the children clung to Anna, wide-eyed, while she stared at Cole like she'd never seen him before. He holstered his Colt, exhaling slow. "They won't trouble you again." Anna stepped forward, voice trembling. You risked your life." A Cole shrug, though the tension in his shoulders betrayed more. "Seemed worth the risk." For a long moment, the only sound was the wind sighing over the plains. Then Anna reached out, laying a hand against his arm. Her touch was soft, but it carried weight, gratitude, trust, something more. "You don't have to walk alone, Cole," she whispered. His storm gray eyes met hers, and for the first time in years, the hardened gunslinger felt something stir besides anger and regret. Maybe, just maybe, the West hadn't stripped everything from him yet. The closing scene weeks later, the shack stood sturdier, patched with fresh wood, a new roof glinting under the sun. Chickens pecked in the dirt yard. The children's laughter rang clearer, less burdened by hunger. Cole leaned against the post, watching Anna hang laundry, her face glowing in the light. She caught his gaze and smiled, warm, unguarded. The West was still hard, still merciless. But now, Cole Danner wasn't fighting it alone. And in that small shack on the edge of nowhere, he'd found something worth more than all the silver dollars he could pay.